YouTube. How are you doing? Welcome to the Yarn Thing podcast with Marley Bird. I am your host, Marley Bird. You can catch the Yarn Thing podcast live Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. That's 12 o'clock on the East Coast, 9 o'clock on the West Coast, and 11 o'clock in the Midwest. If you're anywhere else in the world and would like to join us for the broadcast, please go ahead and Google what time 10 o'clock Mountain Time is for you and come and join us for the live show. Here on the show, we are blessed to have guests that come on and offer prizes, give us inside scoops to projects and yarn and books and all the fun things. So I'm excited to have today's guest joining us. She hasn't been on probably in like 5 years. Like it's been a long time. But I am talking about designer Joi, and she is just one of my favorite seamstresses. She's amazing. And so as you guys know, Caitlin was hosting the unofficial summer wardrobe event where she was working along crocheting. She crocheted most of hers, I think, different wardrobes or different wardrobe pieces. And she had asked me, she said, Marley, do you know a seamstress? Do you know somebody who might be willing to show how to make like an underlayer, something to go underneath some of these lacier pieces? And I said, well, actually, I do. And so here we are. We have Joi joining us on the show. So welcome, my friend.
Hi, good to be with you again.
It's so nice to have you here. Because I know that, we're mainly knitters and crocheters here, and they might not know much about you. Why don't you take a quick second and let them know a little bit about who you are?
Sure. Well, I tell everyone I'm a creative fashion sewing entrepreneur because I do a variety of things. And I think that's what I love about what I do. I get to write books. I've been on Craftsy, which is how we met several years ago. And I have a design studio here in Sioux City, Iowa, where I film classes, and I have a private pattern club that's on Facebook. So we film, actually, this is my studio right here for that. And then I design custom clothing for people that just come in. Well, they make appointments. It's not that they stop in off the street, but we're open, to the public as well. And I get to work with baby lock sewing machines and Mettler threads. So I love what I do.
Yeah. I mute myself so it doesn't come back to me and I forget to unmute. You are top notch. You've done a lot of different things. You know your stuff, essentially, is where we are. So when Caitlin contacted you, like, how did that go? Were you like, what do you want to do? Or were you like, yes, that's a great idea? Like, kind of tell me the story.
Yeah, well, I was so excited because I don't watch your blog all the time because traditionally I'm not a knitter, although there's so many similarities. So, we met, like I said, several years ago. And so, I'm on your newsletters and, so I follow you. And so she called and she's like, hey, Marley reached out. And I was like, of course, because like you said, I think it's been probably 5 years since I was on. And I know we hit it off the last time and just had a lot of fun, but I really do view a lot of crossover in a lot of like the creative arts. There really are little tips and techniques that really do translate. While you wouldn't necessarily think, oh, garment sewing things are applicable to crochet or knit, but in reality they are. And some of the same principles that you guys use in creating knitted garments really are applicable, and things that I relate to my sewers in my classes, understanding stretch and how you get a stretch garment to fit, or the patterns are smaller because you're expecting them to stretch and things like that. So so she reached out, and initially, I can't remember what she initially asked me to do. And I said, well, what if I designed a pattern for you guys to complement and go along with some of your designs? And I think she was currently in the process of creating these two knitted garments here. And I'm like, that's perfect. And so, that's really what I did. I took my skills and just made not a complicated pattern. I think sometimes in sewing, we always think patterns are really complicated, but a lot of our garments that we wear from a day-to-day basis or we layer with really are simple. So that was my challenge. And I just thought I want to bring something to knitters, especially if maybe your audience doesn't sew at all, and that might give them a chance to try it out.
That's perfect. So I think those pieces behind you, those are crochet. So that's even better.
Okay.
So it goes,
Yeah.
you can get those done even faster. So cool. So without further, I feel like we should kind of dive in and just let you just take the story away. I'll be following along in the chat. If you are watching live, if you have questions and such, please ask them in the chat room and I'll be sure to ask Joi. There will be a giveaway at the end of the show. So make sure you stick around for that. There's also going to be a special bonus offer. So you will not want to miss out on any of that. So I'm still here. I'm just going to try and be behind the scenes and let you do what you do best.
Okay, no, that's great. So I'm just, like I said, going to talk about kind of I always look at any design project as kind of like my demographic or who I'm designing for. And so it's always very different. And so as I mentioned, my goal here was really to create a garment pattern that knitters and crocheters might be able to use in conjunction with things that you're making, primarily clothing, obviously. And really, you know, when you're crocheting and knitting, and I'll preface this by saying, I was talking to Marley before we went live. I don't knit, but I do crochet, although it's because I do primarily sewing for my business. I don't get a chance to do it really that often. But I do understand, you know, the concept, and I have, you know, that understanding in that regard. And a lot of, you know, garments that are knitted and crocheted have kind of a lacy effect. Like there is an opening between each stitch. You know, sometimes when you're doing those needle arts, you know, they might be really close together or they might be really spread apart, but typically a crocheted or knitted garment, you would probably wear something underneath it. Maybe the exception might be a really dense sweater or something like that. But since we were doing and kind of focusing towards your summer sew along, obviously it's summertime, like where I'm at, it's hot. We have an over 100-degree heat index today. And so we're not going to put on lofty cable knit sweaters, which is my favorite, by the way. But you know, you can still wear things that have, you know, more of an open weave or an open like gauge to that, but you need something to wear underneath. So what I did was I put together a design that literally includes 3 pattern pieces. And I'm going to tilt my camera and we'll see if we can see this on my work table here. I'll kind of flip this around. There we go. Make sure my light's not too bright, but basically this is the front of the pattern, and then there's a corresponding back piece which is similar, slightly different in the arm opening. But literally you can make this garment with a front and a back, and if you want to add a sleeve you can, but it's not required. And so the general idea for sewing this garment, and I'm going to take a Sharpie. I'm kind of known for Sharpies when I teach my pattern making online, so you can really see what's going on. You're literally going to sew down the sides. So I'm going to hold that up there. So where the red broken line is where you're going to stitch your pattern together, and then across the shoulder area. And you guys are familiar again a little bit with, you know, clothing with your knitting patterns. But we're just going to apply this towards actual fabric yardage. And I have a couple really cool tricks to share with you. But this particular pattern, you're going to cut it on the fold on the front and the back piece. So literally you just take your fabric, fold it in half, you line this edge up on the fold, and then you cut your pattern out. Now this pattern will be available for download on my website, which we have a new one that conveniently went live today, which is really exciting. And we're putting a bunch more things in our store, but this is on there. You can download it, and I have it graded so that it will be available in size 4 to 6, all the way up to like 20, 26, 28. So there's a wide variety of sizes in there. And there is a slight difference in the sizes, but the pattern is really easy. And like I said, all you're going to do is lay your fabric out, and you're going to cut your pattern pieces out. Now I'm going to do an actual sew along on my Facebook Live this Thursday. So if you really want to see me cutting these pieces out, sewing them together, I'm going to do that start to finish. But the idea is that you can create it without sleeves or with sleeves. And so on the samples that I have back here, let me squeeze those in here. So this particular design, and it's a little bit longer, and of course you can always adjust the length. That's just simply, you know, whacking off the bottom of your fabric. And I put just a slight little drape in the neckline because I know if you're like me, I love to layer clothing, even in the summer, because sometimes you're inside where the air conditioning's on and it's so weird that it gets really chilly. And then you go outside to warm up. So you take your sweater off and you go outside and then you get hot. So you come back in and then you're in the air conditioning and you throw something back on.
Always.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I
Yeah.
have a scarf on right now because it's a little bit cold. I'm like, that'll be perfect. Yeah, I totally get it.
Yeah. And I so run into that. And so a lot of times, like now, as I mentioned, while it's really, really hot, I don't typically wear a lot of long sleeves. But again, I might get a little chilly. So I throw something on. And this is great because one thing that I want to point out is there are so many, like fabric, you go through the yarn section and you can get glittery yarn and you can get like the really chubby yarn. And I mean, in different, tonal yarns, threads the same way, like this is a tonal yarn or variegated where it has, the variegated colors to it. And sewing thread is, I mean, we have the same thing in sewing thread. The really neat thing about kind of creating complementary, fabrics or garments that you can wear with your knitted and crocheted designs is that unlike, just running and grabbing a t-shirt, when you go to the fabric store, and probably most of you probably go to a big box store or a store that also sells fabric, you see really beautiful fabrics. And I love to mix and match things, not so that they look like flamboyant necessarily, because most of us, like from day to day, we want to look kind of coordinated, but there are so many amazing fun fabrics that you can coordinate with your knitted yarns to create just some really beautiful combinations. And I have some examples here. Everything from, well, I have to show, I was going to save this one for last, but I'm going to start first. So this is like a glittery, just a jersey knit. So it's like a t-shirt material. And I think you guys can see a little bit of the shimmer on there. So I ordered this for some holiday designs. Now imagine wearing, like some maybe black dress pants or a skirt, something like that with some really neat boots or heels, and then having like a rayon. I know there's a rayon, help me with this, Marley, but there's a rayon yarn, I believe, that has
there's rayon or there's silk or bamboo or anything like with a lot of drape to it would be beautiful.
Yeah.
And
so you could put, make like a vest out of some of that, like that silk bamboo.
Yes.
There are knits that are bamboo actually is one of my favorite fibers just in general because it's just feels so good on the skin. And that would be amazing with this. And so I think a lot of times, and probably not your audience and you guys listening because, you're very, aware of all the options, but I think, sewing's the same way. You get someone that's like, I don't really want to sew. My grandma used to do that. Or, and there's so many new things available on the market where we can really make our arts really fashionable and creative, or just cater them to our own personal likes and dislikes. Someone might be watching and think, I would never wear a glittery, knit, but maybe the opposite is the case. Maybe you want just a solid knit shirt, and then maybe from there you want to get, some glittery yarn and wear that over, or just some of the more muted so that it's, we just always customize everything to our own interest.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so here's another fun knit, and I'm primarily featuring today knit fabrics. And when I say knit, fabrics that have stretch to them and that are actually woven as a knitted fabric. And so in fabric production, sometimes like in our jeans, how jeans have like stretch to them. They're
Thank
not
God.
really, yeah. And I am not a fan of like jeggings or pants that have lycra or spandex in them, but they're not a knit fabric. It's just that the fiber that they make them out of has some stretch to it because they weave in like some spandex. That's really all that is. But we're actually talking, like think of like t-shirt fabric, but fashion ones.
Yeah.
And I love this one. How fun is this? And again, I probably would put a solid or maybe some sort of variegated yarn, over top of that, and maybe some of the tonal colors or something that complemented that. I have to tell you this. So as I was working on the pattern and the process, it's the same for you, I'm sure, Marley. But when you're making a pattern, you always do samples first just to make sure everything goes together. And sometimes when you're doing your sample, you're like, oh, I'll just grab the ugly stuff that I'm not really going to use, right? So I had this fabric that I bought actually last summer, and it looked so great online. And I just hated it when I got it. And I thought that is the ugliest thing ever, because I intended for it to be a skirt. But when I made the sample out of it, I realized it has like these beautiful denim tones to it. And all of a sudden I'm like, yes, what an amazing shirt. And you could do some yarn, like a vest. I'm in a vest mode right now, but you could do, you know, or a cardigan in like denim colored, like yarn to go with this, throw on like some sterling silver jewelry, and it would just be so cool. But it was just so funny. It doesn't happen too often that I'm just off on a fabric selection, but this was one where it didn't. Cool. Yeah, the project I ordered it for, it just didn't read correctly. And so I just did the sample and it was like, oh my word, that's like the coolest shirt. So you'll probably see me in a long sleeve version of this very soon.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. So what I think, and I don't know if there are going to be questions from the audience or whatever, but I want to just talk about the sewing aspect of this. And so the pattern, really, I have kind of three options for sewing it together. Because I know you probably have some in your audience that are like, I don't want to take up another hobby, or I don't want to learn to sew. Or maybe somebody out there is like, I really know how to sew, and they like the concept and the idea. So I mentioned the whole idea of this particular pattern. It really only takes a yard to maybe 2 yards of fabric, because most of these knit fabric yardages are really wide. And so unless you want like a ton of extra length or something, you can kind of, you know, cut your pattern out and then just lay it out and see if it fits. So you're not talking, you know, a huge expense, you know, for fabric yardage. And then you just need some thread and a sewing machine needle. Now, if you literally do not have a sewing machine, you could sew this by hand. I would not have any problem having somebody do your, you know, you'd have to, and I won't do it here, but make sure that you know how to like sew your seams. And you do some of that, I know, in like knit and crochet construction, you know, in like putting your seams and things together. So the concept really does cross over. But if you wanted just the very, very basic sewing, I do what I called the natural like no sew edge, and you don't really have to put a finish on the neckline, the hem, or the arm's eye or the arm opening if you just aren't to that level in your sewing ability. And I'm just going to show, I'm going to tilt my camera here and see if I can get that just close enough. So on most jersey knits, which are like your t-shirt material, they're a single knit and they have a roll to them. And it's kind of neat because if you just literally go and kind of stretch the edge, and I'll hold that there, hopefully you can see that, but it curls under or to the front. And you can actually go to, like a lot of the like jeans and t-shirt stores, like Old Navy, I was drawing a blank there, but you can go to stores and buy clothing that is like this. And basically they just eliminate in the production, putting the actual stitched hem on there. It's kind of, I always think that's really funny. Like, why would you pay for an unfinished shirt? But you know, it's kind of like a deconstructed look. And so when you're creating this particular garment, if you literally just want to stitch, okay, I just did a side seam and a shoulder, and now I'm just gonna, you know, roll and go around and kind of put some tension on the armhole and the neckline, just causes that to roll, and boom, you have a easy wardrobe piece. You can make a ton of these really quickly and just expand your wardrobe. So that really is like your basic application.
One thing I want to point out is for all the knitters out there, this is very similar to like if you just went straight into stockinette, how the fabric naturally curls towards the knit side. You know, it's the nature of how the knits and the purls combine. The fabric wants to curl to the knit side. So because this is a knit fabric, it's the same concept. So it just naturally just curls on itself.
Yeah. And I think a lot of designing, and, you as a designer, share this with your audience, is that a lot of it, I think designing and sewing really is about utilizing the characteristics of, in your case, yarn, or in my case, fabric. But if you know what it does, then as a designer or just a creator in general, use that to your advantage. So, I think I'm this way. I mean, I'm sure there's always something to learn in any of our arts. I'm always getting better and always trying new combinations of fabrics and patterns. But I always in the forefront is, okay, what am I trying to achieve? Am I trying to sew or create a really complex garment? And so if that's the case, then I want to choose things or, stitches or designs that will cater to that style. Or if I'm trying to do something that's just more, every day, and I really want to utilize the beauty of like how the fabric is created, not everything has to be really complicated. And you do a lot of those, I do a lot of those, but that's certainly not, everything that we do as creators. And I think that really makes it more enjoyable, because you literally can go and pick out, a fun fabric and know that you can successfully just do something that is easy. And again, complement, your yarns, and golly, some of these, I put a stripe with this one. I guess I didn't talk a whole lot about this one. And I know your assistant had mentioned, I never thought of putting a stripe with that.
I love stripes. I love stripe patterns. I love stripes and patterns combined.
Yeah,
Like, I love
I
it.
did too. And I think it can be done in very interesting ways, not so that they clash, but I do that too. I love mixing and match. Like, I'm a plaid and stripe person as well.
Yes.
So I love just, combining. And so this one, for example, and I almost did the stripes vertically on here, because, like wide stripes and, some of that. But you can do that, like with your pattern, maybe cut the front of the garment with the stripe going one way and the back, at an angle. And so this pattern really allows you to kind of just, it's really not going to affect any of the fit, because we're using knit fabrics. You can literally place it however you want on your fabric and get, great combinations of, stripes. And of course, I like chevron as well too. And we won't get into that here, but when you bring the stripes to a point, I have so many chevron skirts. I have to stop making them, but I just seriously love it. But again,
it's satisfying.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes it's just putting, those interesting things together that I think a lot of times people might just look at this and say, okay, I need to go get like a purple shirt to wear under this, which you can. But yeah, and I would even wear stripes with, like, I would wear stripes with that. Totally, or polka dots, or, what our animal print. Like, I would wear this together. I really would. And, so, we kind of talked about that. If you're a more advanced sewer, and I do think in sewing, I'm not sure if it's the same way in the knitting community, but I think there sometimes is a lot of flack against, kind of just like what I was just talking about, just enjoying a design, not necessarily over sewing or over designing. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with doing a simplified hem, that kind of thing. But if you're a more advanced sewer and you're thinking, no, I really want to like put a finish on the edge of my neckline, we have that in the pattern instructions as well. And it can be as simple as turning the edge under and just stitching it with your machine. There are things called sergers in garment sewing.
There's questions about that.
Okay, yeah.
We have a couple.
Okay, yeah, maybe I don't know if you want to ask those and I'll answer them.
Sure. So Carrie Benson says, can you use a regular sewing machine, or do we need a serger? So that's the first question.
Yeah, great question. You can absolutely use a regular sewing machine. If you have a serger, you can, but my instructions are written for both. And in this case, the serger is optional. Now, I actually do teach a ton of like more advanced knit classes where we just create garments on sergers. And that's really what they were created for. But you can absolutely make this with a regular machine. One thing I want to point out is that typically it'll be the same for knitting. The most stretch goes around the body. You don't necessarily want your garment expanding and shrinking. One time I made my daughter a mermaid tail when she was little, and without thinking, I did the stretch vertically. And so she had this really long mermaid tail that she could not get into. And so, yeah, yeah, it was quite comical actually. And yeah, she still gives me a hard time about that. But your stretch goes around the body. And so a regular straight stitch or even a zigzag stitch, but truthfully, a straight stitch on a knit fabric is absolutely appropriate because you don't need the stretch to go up and down. So there's not going to be any tension on that. There's no chance of it like popping out. And actually, I like that better than kind of traditional sewing on a regular sewing machine tells you put a zigzag stitch, but for the up and down, that's not necessary. And the same thing on the shoulder. That's not an area that you want to stretch. And so a straight stitch is totally acceptable. So this is a knit garment you can make with just a basic sewing machine that has a straight stitch on it. If you do want to turn the edge under, like the armscye, the neckline, and the hem, and you do want to put some sort of stitch on there, then a zigzag, or I like the lightning stitch, which is kind of like a lightning bolt. I know it's kind of hard to airbrush it here with my hand, but that's a flexible stitch. And so that when it stretches to go around your body, there's some give in the stitch, and then it's less likely to pop out.
Okay.
And of course, if you have a serger, you can use those too, but not required.
Awesome. Yeah. So there was a suggestion on here that you could use a zigzag stitch instead of a serger.
Yes.
Helen Henry would like to know that she has heard that you should always wear something under your knits to absorb the body odor or body oils and such. What type of material would be good for this? Like a cotton?
Yeah, that's actually a really great wardrobing question in general. And so, so you have different fiber contents in fabrics. And so things like your rayon, your silk, your cotton and wool, hands down, are natural fibers. They're always going to be more breathable, and the care, with the exception of silk and rayon, for example, you can hand wash or even on delicate and cold machine wash. And I do it with silks as well, but I do not dry them. I lay them out on a rack to dry, but they're really easy to care for. And so they're more breathable. Your things like your polyester and your manufactured fibers, and it'll be true in yarns as well. When you have blends and things like that, you tend to sweat more because they're not as breathable. So, and I think some people sweat more than others. And again, it depends on, the garment. If it's 100-degree day and you have like a bulky cable knit, overlay on, you're going to sweat more. And so I like to air, especially this time of year, cotton knits, probably cotton yarns or some of those natural fibers. But as far as wearing something underneath, you can layer and wear like a camisole top, but typically that doesn't like rest under the underarms. So, but just, wash your clothes like after each wear. And that is actually one advantage to creating something like a cotton layer to wear under your knitted garments. Like that does create a barrier for your body oils to absorb into this, and then it will create more longevity and something that is more delicate.
Yeah, that's what she's saying. So that's cool.
That
Sarah Dawn says, "Oh, I'd never thought about letting the edges of the sewn garment curl like that. I've got a couple of things I've bought that I can do that. I've never really made the connection." So that's really great there.
Yeah.
Julia says, "Do we need a special thread for sewing knit fabric?"
Yeah, great question. So a universal thread is excellent. If you're sewing with like 100% cotton, you can certainly use cotton thread, but really your universal thread, and those universal threads typically do have like a polyester blend, to them. That's not going to add heat or bulk or anything like that. The only exception might be if I'm doing like a silk, like I do have a silk jersey fabric that I can order. It is by far the most yummiest. It snags really easy. So I typically use it when I create like wedding garments or things like special occasion where we might do like a camisole and then have, you know, something like this that's over top. So I tend to do that as not like a jacket because it just snags really easily. But I always sew those in silk, but that's really the only exception. So universal thread is acceptable.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Crafty Chats Cafe says that she is a beginner, capital letters, sewist, and has the most basic machine. She says, I would love a project with basic skills I could do quickly. What would you recommend? I'm assuming this project would be a
This
good.
one, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And I'll do a sew along on this Thursday on my designer Joi, it's Joi Mahone Facebook page, 1:00 Central Standard Time, and I'm actually gonna sew one of these. So we're gonna go through that. I'm not pulling out my fancy machine. I'm gonna have my very A-line machine because that's what a lot of people have, and so
That's what I have.
yeah, you don't always need all the fancy bells and whistles. So yeah, absolutely. So this will be a really good one for you.
Perfect. All right. So that's all the questions. Everybody, they're just saying they love this. This is exciting. So yeah, keep going.
Okay, yeah, no, that's great. And then of course, back to the question about the serger. So kind of and I teach in layers. So I like to address, you know, like what are we making? Who is it for? What's the special need? Or, you know, whether it's, you know, I need something breathable or something warm. So you kind of figure out the scenario and then you pick from there, you know, your threads, your yarns, you know, those materials. And then like the third part of layering, you know, in any design is okay, how can I expand this for either someone maybe more advanced or once I learn how to do this, if I want to take it just a step further. And so kind of that step further would be, okay, let's add, you know, fun stitches. If we have a machine that does like a serger that has a cover stitch. And what that is if you buy a purchase t-shirt and you look at the edge that's folded under, usually has like 2 rows of stitching and then a real fancy zigzag kind of on the underside. It's an awesome stitch. I do have a cover stitch machine, but most people don't. That's not real practical for most people. But if you have that, or some sewing machines have a mock cover stitch on it, then you can experiment with those things and kind of step it up a notch or do decorative, you know, I've purchased t-shirts this way too, where they have that rolled edge, but right above the rolled edge, they still have like a fun row of stitching or something like that in a colorful thread. So you can experiment with that. And so it's always any project is that way, you know, learn how to do it. And then once you really know what you're doing, then be creative, try it in other you know, other fabrics. Maybe you've started in cotton and now you want to try one of those silk ones or things like that. Yeah. And then of course I do have a sleeve addition to this pattern and it's a very basic sleeve and it's meant for a knit fabric, but it's really forgiving. I teach a lot of sleeve fitting, and for garment sewers, that can be a real, like, you know, I can never get sleeves to fit and all of that. And so this one has a real specific sleeve. And so you just line up the top and you line up the underarm, and then you can put a couple pins in there and then stitch around that. And it goes in very, very easily. All the sizes are tested. So, you know, that's just one additional piece. But yeah, for those of you that are just real basic, start with the sleeveless and make 1 or 2 of them and then go and hey, try to make a sleeve. And the same thing, I made this one. I have long arms, and so I move a lot. And so are you the same way? So if I do buy shirts and the sleeves are always up here, and it's like they're not quite the 3/4, but they're not short, they're not long.
This one is meant to, I end up buying 3/4 all the time because I'm like, well, at least then I know it's supposed to be short.
Yeah. And so, and if I like in live classes, which we don't have any now because of COVID, but you know, I'm always like, my husband says, you're Italian, but so I made this one really long, but of course you can always like, you know, fold it up and, you know, do some creative things that way. And I love to add buttons and, different like interesting details, whether, maybe it's a brooch or something too. I mean, you can add those. I meant to bring, and I forgot, but I do have a little lace jacket. It's a cardigan. It had, long sleeves, and I just put like a little brooch there, and you can change that out, make it rhinestone or whatever. So yeah, so that's kind of that layering. I know I was looking at my notes here. Oh, and then the last thing, there are some really fun fold over elastics that you can literally just, if this is the edge of your fabric, and they just literally like go over the edge, and then you can stitch those down. And so they're, kind of those added trims that you can add to. So yeah.
So basically it's 2 pieces of fabric. You cut them to the shape that for your pattern, and you seam up those little where you put the dash marks. Like that's it.
Yeah, that's it. And just again, it's specifically for knit fabric. So if you're a sewer and you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, I'm going to make this out of cotton, like denim, don't do that, because not that it wouldn't work, but it's really intended, to, and that's, I think, how I designed it, so that it really would be easy. For beginners.
That's awesome. There is a question about, on the sewing machine, do you have to be careful about the type of needle that you're using because you're using a knit fabric?
Yes. So, and I'll illustrate this in my sew along, but you can use a knit ballpoint needle. Usually knit patterns recommend that, but you can use a universal needle. But they come in different sizes, just like knitting needles. And so you don't want a really blunt, large needle. So I use like a 10 or a 12 size. That way it's just small enough and doesn't mess with the integrity of the knit fabric.
Awesome. Barbara Dahl is laughing at us. She says, Marley, you've met your match in speed talking.
I love
it. You guys, it's so awesome. Like, I met her and she's real tall like me. And I was like, you're taller than I thought you'd be. And she goes, everybody says that. I'm like, everybody says that to me too. Like, it was so awesome. When you meet people, you're just like, man, I really like them. Like, I would totally hang out with them. That's totally how I felt with you.
I love it. Yeah. And that's funny because I am a fast, and I try, how like you got to practice slow. Yeah. Sometimes it just comes. Well, I think the thing is, I love what I like. It is such a passion, and you get so excited that you're just like, and this, and that, and this, and that.
Oh yeah, and then wait, then I have this. Yeah, I totally.
Because you're exploding from the inside out. I mean, that's what it is. So.
I remember at Craftsy, they would tell me, talk to a level that you think you're going too slow, and that's actually perfect. And I said, are you serious? And they're like, yes, that's perfect. I'm like, really? That slow? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay. Like, but that does not feel natural. They're like, that's too fast. So whatever.
Yeah, that's funny. Oh my goodness. You know what my big thing was? Like, and then you do this, and they're always like, don't pound the table because the microphones, and I'm like, no, and touch the pattern here. Weird. Yeah.
That is hilarious. Well, I mean, it looks like everybody online is saying that this is absolutely doable. Good. It's fantastic. Angela Pa says that I'm a fan of Joi, and I have all of her Craftsy classes. I do too, guys. She's amazing. Which Craftsy is coming back, y'all. If you don't know, I'm so happy. Like,
I know.
At first, I was so sad that NBC was getting rid of Blueprint, and then I was like, okay, so somebody bought it, and then they're like, we're bringing back Craftsy. I'm like, that's brilliant. Like, you should do that. Craftsy is awesome.
There is such a good audience, and I know a lot of our listeners, and I think they're truly going to try to make it what it was. So us instructors are really happy because we were just like left to the side for a long time.
Yeah, we were. Yes, we were. So Craftsy is coming back. So if you don't know, like, just stay tuned. And Joi has a lot of classes there on Craftsy too, but she does really great Facebook Live. She has classes that she does virtually. So I'm going to let her talk about that. And as she talks about it, we're actually going to give away a prize live on air. And then there's also, if you leave a comment on the show notes, which have been linked in the video description box below. And just so you know, that's where you will go to get the pattern that Joi's talked about today and check out her new website and all of the good stuff there. But if you leave a comment on those show notes, you'll have a chance to win the same prize. And so do you want to tell them what they're entering for a chance to win, and then tell them all about it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, first I have to share, I'm so excited that I was approached. So I am working on a new sewing book, which is really exciting. Yeah, we literally just got the contract and everything. So we're at but it's going to be cool. So I'm excited about that. But you'll have to wait till next year for that. But I have an online a pattern club. It's called Designer Joy's Perfect Pattern and Fit Club. And really, I'm heading into my third season, and it really kind of came out of the fact that when Craftsy was sold, I had so many students that were real active in my classes. And, like in any class, you have a lot of students, and some people just kind of survey, but you have like that core of people that are really genuinely trying to learn what you're doing. And so progressively, some of that communication was really limited. And I thought, when you film a class, you can't answer every question, and you can't anticipate every question, and you can't go back and add to it. And so I really thought, I'm going to start this club. And so that's what it is. And so, I teach in my kind of fun, quirky fashion, but I do a live news segment every Tuesday where it's just kind of informal, and I share all the latest information or things you need to know as a member. And then I teach a live class, and it's on Facebook. It is a paid club. And the idea is that I know there are a lot of clubs where there are just thousands of people, but you just, you want to really be able to develop and really teach skills. And so in our pattern club, I teach how to design patterns, how to fit patterns, and it's really truly is for all skill levels. And there's sewing tips and tricks. And then the great thing is that in our live lessons, a lot of times students will email pictures of things they're working on, and then I upload those, and then I can evaluate those on camera, and so you can see what other students are doing, and all of that. But coming up, so October is normally our getting gear for the next season, and I do a special event. And so this month, it just happens to be, we're going to do all things knits, and I'm going to do it very similar to what I did in January this year. We had an event called All Things Pants, and there were over 19 lessons, most of them stand alone. So if you don't, if there are some aspects that you don't want to watch, you're not necessarily tied into having to watch all of them. And so that's what we're doing for All Things Knits. And so there are going to be at least 19 lessons, and then some sew alongs as well. But we're going to cover things like, basic, garment sewing, and then how to design a knit pattern from just a basic shape. And I have a thing that I teach called the magic formula, and it really is how do you take a pattern for like non-stretch garments and shrink it down to accommodate a stretchy pattern. Yeah, because knit patterns and your knitting patterns, I'm sure, are the same way. Unless it's meant to be larger, the patterns are meant to be smaller so that when you put them on your body, they stretch. Otherwise, you have these garments that are too big. And so that's just one lesson in many. And so I thought it was really timely that we'll give away the last quarter, which will be September through December. So we'll do a giveaway here, I think, for a live person and then someone on the Facebook. And so we'll give you free membership. You can check that out. And then I'm going to do a special for all your listeners who maybe just want to, like, okay, what's Joi about? Like, do I want to dapple in this? Typically membership's $25 a month, but we'll do a special for the last quarter, just $25. And so you can join us from September through December. And that includes everything we're doing in October, which will be a ton of knit information. And I do promise you that if you're a knitter or crocheter, what I'm going to share really will translate over. I'm not going to teach you how to make garments knitted per se, but a lot of the ins and outs of fitting and understanding body measurements will be really, really helpful for your craft as well.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So you're offering a free membership to somebody who's watching live. And then we'll also offer that same price to somebody who leaves a comment on the show notes. And the show notes, once again, are over at marleybird.com. I've put a link in the video description box below. Remember, click the link, takes you to the show notes. Scroll to the bottom of the show notes, read all the stuff in between. But at the bottom is where you're going to find the comments for you to leave a comment. And the comment should be a keyword. So I'm going to have you give me a keyword that people will type in here if you're watching live, and they will also leave it on the show notes. So that way we'll just have it the same in both places.
Okay, can it be how about magic formula, because that's what I call understanding how to the formula for shrinking your pattern.
I love that. Magic formula, you guys. Okay, so if you're watching live right now, it is 12:46 p.m. on Tuesday. Type in magic formula in the chat area. We will randomly select a winner, and you are winning this fantastic prize. As Joi said, it's usually $25 a month, so you're winning this full prize, right?
Yeah, and I'll probably actually, if they want to contact you and get an address too, I'll send them a Pattern Club bundle. So we have Pattern Club journals and pencils, because I love logo stuff, and it's a place to take notes when you're listening. And I'll probably send them a copy of my fashion sewing workshop book as well.
Awesome. So when we pick the winner, I'll have them email me so that we can send you all that information. But if you do not win today, don't hesitate to join these online courses with Joi. She is fantastic, you guys. So I watched her classes at Craftsy because I wanted to learn more about fit. Obviously we've talked about this. I'm a big girl, and I mean, knitting patterns, at least when I started, all they really ever did when it was time for, a size 2X, 3X, everything was just exponentially sized larger. And I'm like, but I'm not exponentially bigger everywhere. This does not work. So I remember watching your classes. I'm like, oh my gosh, this makes so much more sense. The things that I had put together on my own, you kind of solidified and made clear. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so, absolutely.
The way you teach is phenomenal, you guys. You will love her. You will love her. Totally worth the money, and it's fantastic. When you do the classes, if they happen to miss one, do they have the ability to go back and watch it later?
Yes. Yeah. And actually, and I do have students around the world. I have a student in Australia who gets up at 3:00 in the morning just so she can watch live, bless her heart. But yeah, so everything is archived, titled. And so there are different units in there. And so everything is chronological. And that's part of the reason why I do a weekly news at noon, because sometimes students are away for a while. I do that. I sometimes don't go to a class every week. It might be oh, I was busy over the summer, and you feel I'm very intentional. I don't want students to feel ooh, I haven't participated since May. Now I'm behind. You're not behind. So how I work club is that just go in and catch the latest news segment. They're about 20 minutes, maybe a little longer if there's a lot of live questions. And that's going to tell you everything that's current to the current previous couple weeks and going forward. And then you just watch the most current lesson. And then when you have time, go back and watch things that you didn't catch live. Right. So most things are standalone lessons, unless I maybe have a little series going on where there might be a few lessons that are linked together. But yeah, and I think that makes it just very doable, because sometimes you can't watch every single lesson.
Right. All right. So many people have typed in magic formula. I am scrolling. You tell me when to stop. That'll be the lucky winner.
Okay. Come on, big money now.
All right. That's Sally Rainwater. So it keeps scrolling. Sally Rainwater. So I'm going to say at Sally Rainwater. Congratulations.
Yay.
So Sally, what I need you to do is I need you to email me winner@yarnthingpodcast.com. That's winner@yarnthingpodcast.com. And you need her mailing address, phone number, and then I'll just forward that directly to you. So then you'll have her email. You'll have everything you need.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to type in here, email us, just so she knows.
Yeah.
winner@yarnthingpodcast.com. Perfect. So congratulations to Sally. That's fantastic. Don't forget, you guys still have a chance to win this on your own as well. Go to the show notes. I love your comments here on YouTube. YouTube loves that. Actually, if you haven't had a chance to smash the like button yet, you guys, make sure you do that, because it's your interaction here on YouTube. It's hitting that like button, making sure you're subscribed, leaving a comment on YouTube, like all of that helps me get my name out there. So that's the best way you can actually help support me. If you are unable to do it financially by like buying patterns and stuff, no judgment whatsoever, but like that's how you can help. So yes, I love your comments here, but for a chance to win, you must leave your comments on the show notes. It makes it so much easier for us to select a winner if they're all in one place and not like a bunch of different places we have to look. So make sure you go to the show notes. The link is in the video description box. But yeah, it's pretty awesome. I'm so happy you're here. I just love having you here. And the fact that
having me.
It's like super doable sewing. Like you didn't even sew. And I'm like, I could do this. I know how to do this. And now I'm like, I really want to go get some sort of like leopard print or something. Is it bad? I'm like, And then I'm like, can I make it A-line? Because I'm a little bit bigger on the bottom than I am at the top. And I'm like, all the choices here.
Yeah.
Very so cool. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you for coming over here. And if people want to follow along with you, we have put that information in the show notes, but just so that they know, do you want to give a shout out here?
Yeah, absolutely. So my Facebook page is Designer Joi Mahone, and my name is spelled JoiMahon. And I'm on Instagram. Just look up Designer Joi. My website is designerjoi.com. So if you're interested also in like the last quarter and you just want to try that out, just shoot us an email through the contact us. And then we'll get back to you. We just usually send out an invoice through PayPal, and then you can just go right to Designer Joi's Perfect Pattern and Fit Club and then request access. And then maybe write Marley Bird in the note section as well. And then we'll let you into the club.
Like, this is your magic password. What's the password?
What's the secret password? Yeah.
Pink elephant.
Actually, yeah. So I have a funny story. Do I have time to tell it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
So we have a funny password here at my studio. So last winter, we like, of course, we're in the Midwest and it was so cold, and I'm in like a giant old brick building. Well, our pipe froze under our plumbing, and so like the toilet literally was frozen one day. And so the plumbers came, and it got to be this standing joke that when someone knocked on the back door, we'd say, "What's the password?" And they'd all go, "Frozen toilet." So we still use that. We didn't
That's
know, what's
awesome.
The password? Frozen toilet.
I love that. That is so fantastic. That's so fantastic. I love it. I can't follow up that. That's fantastic. I got nothing. I am literally speechless.
Oh.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for doing this for us. I know that there are a lot of people who did the wardrobe event who, some of them are like, man, it's kind of lazy. I'm going to have to wear something underneath. And now they have an option of, hey, I could just make something. And I love that you even showed us some prints that you purchased online. Like, given that there are still some people who can't go outside and do shopping. Do you have suggestions by chance? Because I wouldn't even know where to look. Like, where would you look for?
Yeah, absolutely. And really quick, so the pattern, you can download that now on our website. And since we literally launched our new website, it just worked out. The timing was that she was going live with it last night. You can pre-order it. The pattern's ready. The PDF just isn't in there. And so that'll be up on Friday. So you can buy the pattern. We'll just directly email those out to everybody. And usually we send in a little extra perk when we have to do that. So that will come to your email box. But yes, as far as fabrics, that's the other thing. So I actually have about 20 different fabrics that are like staple fabrics, like cotton, jersey, and we have them in about 20 different colors. And so we're slowly going to be getting those up on, well, not slowly, hopefully very soon. But you can order those from us. So if you're looking for staple fabrics, I have a good variety of really good fabrics, but you can also go online to places like Vogue Fabrics. They have a swatch club. So they have really, if you're looking for just a random like fashion print that might come out, they have a lot of things like this that are, seasonal. And so, yeah, so check that out. That's a really, and they're affordable and good, good quality. So I would say that's a really good place to start.
Perfect. That's perfect. Awesome. Thank you so much, Joy, for
Thank you,
joining us
Marley.
today. I appreciate it. And all of you who joined us, thank you so much for joining us. I have new videos coming out this week. And if you have not yet watched the announcement video for the Joanne Stitch Along, I wish you would go ahead and go do that. It's a really fun blanket. I'll just give you, here it is right here. So you guys can see it. It's speaking of chevrons, like, look.
I love it.
Such a fun blanket. It was, Erin, the designer, did a great job with it. I would love for you guys to join me. And I know that the yarn is on sale right now at Joanne, so you guys can check that out. But until next time, everybody, I'll talk to you later.